Welcome to this explainer. When you look at the flag of Israel today, it's so easy to just see a simple, almost minimalist design, right? Just a piece of white cloth, two blue stripes, and a six-pointed star right in the middle. But today, we're going to look way past that piece of cloth. We're treating this flag not as some static image, but as a deeply folded story. It's the story of a people who, for countless generations, literally had no independent state, no sovereign capital, and absolutely no army, yet somehow carried this incredibly powerful memory and hope right along with them. Okay, let's kick things off with a question that might just challenge everything you thought you knew. Did King David actually use the Star of David on his shield? Think about it. It's a symbol we see literally everywhere, on synagogues, on the flag, on global organizations. But if we were to hop in a time machine and go back 3,000 years, would King David even recognize the thing? Well, keep that provocative little question in the back of your mind because the answer is going to set the ultimate myth-busting tone for the rest of our journey together. Section 1. The power of symbols. Why do we need flags? All right, to truly wrap our heads around this specific flag, we actually need to zoom out a bit first and look at the universal human need for symbols. You see, humans don't just live by laws or economies. We live by ideas. We live by stories that connect us, the individuals, to a much larger group. Think about it. Why on earth were Roman soldiers willing to literally die in battle just to protect a golden metal eagle? Or why did the French tricolor spark such intense passion during the French Revolution? It's because these physical objects had transformed. That Roman eagle, it wasn't just a chunk of metal anymore. It was the glory of Rome itself. It represented the us. It was this tangible, physical manifestation of belonging and identity. And this brings us to a really crucial point, captured perfectly by historian Benedict Anderson's concept of the imagined community. Basically, this idea explains how shared symbols can connect millions of people who have never actually met face-to-face. Now, for the Jewish people in the 19th century, this wasn't just a neat concept. It was a vital necessity, because unlike other nations fighting for independence at the time, the Jewish people didn't share a single piece of territory. They didn't even share a daily spoken language. They were scattered across entirely different continents, speaking Arabic, Yiddish, Ladino, Russian. There was absolutely no physical border to connect them. So what did connect them? Well, it was their symbols, their shared memories, and their ancient traditions. The thinker Ahad Ha'am actually hit the nail on the head when he famously said, "More than Israel kept tradition, tradition kept Israel." It was the shared texts, the holidays, and those visual symbols that kept this imagined community alive and kicking through centuries of exile, just waiting for the exact right moment to translate an ancient language into a modern political reality. Section 2. Origins of blue and white, the ancient roots of modern colors. Now, when a movement finally began to organize around returning to the homeland, they didn't just randomly pick blue and white because, they look nice together, or just to mimic the sea and the sky. The true origin goes back thousands of years to something called techelet. This was a super rare ancient blue dye extracted from the argamon snail, which was found right along the Mediterranean coast. And let me tell you, it was incredibly expensive to produce. But here's the real kicker. There is a direct biblical commandment in the book of Numbers to place a thread of this specific techelet blue on the fringes of garments, what's known as the tzitzit. So this ancient Jewish language was tied directly to daily physical spiritual practice. And this brilliantly illustrates the whole philosophy behind the color itself. The Talmud actually asks why blue is different and answers it beautifully. Because blue resembles the sea resembles the sky resembles the throne of glory. So you see, the blue dye wasn't merely decorative. Not at all. It was meant to be a cognitive journey. It was specifically designed to pull the observer's gaze upward, away from the purely material world we live in, and towards faith, memory, and spiritual responsibility. Section 3. The first flag unfurlings. The physical flag takes shape. All right, so we've got the conceptual origins down. But when did this ancient idea actually take the shape of a modern flag flying on a flagpole? Well, most folks assume the whole thing started in 1897 at the First Zionist Congress over in Switzerland. But the truth? It's actually way more surprising. 12 years earlier, back in 1885, in this struggling, super sandy agricultural colony in the land of Israel called Rishon LeZion, two pioneers, Israel Belkind and Fanny Mirovich, wanted to celebrate the colony's third anniversary. So they stitched together a piece of white cloth with two blue stripes and a blue Star of David. Over 60 years before the State of Israel was even a reality, this symbol was already flying high in a little vineyard. Fast forward to 1897, just ahead of that first Zionist Congress in Basel.
Leader David Wolfson was really struggling with what flag to display for the event. And then he had this absolute revelation. He realized they didn't actually need to invent anything new at all. He wrote, "We have a flag, blue and white, the Talit. Let us take the Talit out of its bag and unroll it before the eyes of Israel and the eyes of all nations." It was brilliant. Wolfson simply took the traditional Jewish prayer shawl, the Talit, which every single Jewish community globally already knew and recognized, and he moved it from the private space of the synagogue right out into the public political square. Section 4. Myths and Alternative Designs. What almost was and what people believe. Because this history is just so long and complex, a lot of fascinating myths and what-ifs have naturally sprung up around it. Now, what's really interesting here is what almost became the flag. Theodor Herzl, the visionary founder of modern Zionism, he actually didn't care for the blue and white Star of David design at all. In his seminal book, The Jewish State, Herzl envisioned a white flag with 7 gold stars. And those stars, they were meant to represent a 7-hour workday. Herzl was looking toward this new, progressive, utopian social future. But the public, yeah, they overwhelmingly rejected it. They didn't want some brand new social emblem. They wanted a symbol that resonated with their deep historical memory. So the people chose the Talit-inspired flag. And then there's a very popular modern myth regarding those 2 blue stripes. If you ask around today, a lot of people will tell you that the stripes represent the splitting of the Red Sea, with the Jewish people walking right through the dry center toward freedom. And hey, it's an incredibly beautiful, poetic image. But keeping our impartial historian hats on, we have to look at the facts. From an archival perspective, there is absolutely zero evidence from Wolfson, Belkind, or any of the founders that the Red Sea was their inspiration. Historically speaking, the stripes come definitively, 100% from the prayer shawl. However, the Red Sea idea is a perfect example of a modern midrash, which is basically a way that people continually add beautiful new layers of meaning to a living symbol. Section 5. The Star of David's Journey, from geometric shape to national emblem. Okay, let's circle back to that opening question we started with. Did King David march into battle with a 6-pointed star on his shield? Well, the archaeological and historical consensus is almost certainly not. There's actually zero biblical mention of the hexagram as David's symbol. In fact, if you went back 2,000 years to the Second Temple period and asked a Jewish person what their ultimate national symbol was, they wouldn't point to a star. No way. They would point to the menorah, that 7-branch candelabra famously depicted on the Arch of Titus in Rome. The hexagram itself is actually this universal geometric shape that you can find in ancient India, Rome, and even Islamic architecture. It really wasn't until the Middle Ages that it truly began to take center stage in Judaism. A massive turning point actually happened in the 14th century, when the Jewish community of Prague was granted permission to fly a flag featuring the Star of David. And because it was super recognizable, really easy to draw, and highly symmetric, the idea basically spread like wildfire as a unifying symbol for Jewish communities all over the world. But there is a deeply poignant and frankly tragic irony embedded in this star. During the Holocaust, the Nazis forced European Jews to wear a yellow Star of David as this horrific badge of shame, isolation, and death. Yet, just a few short years later, that very same shape was completely, radically reclaimed. What was intended as a mark of ultimate weakness and persecution was hoisted right back up to become the ultimate emblem of life, survival, and national sovereignty. Section 6. From Dream to Sovereign Flag, the final step to statehood. So let's look at the climax of our narrative, the moment when the symbol finally met the state. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel in Tel Aviv, and he was flanked by 2 blue and white flags. But here is a wild historical footnote for you. At that exact moment, the newly born state legally had no official flag. Seriously. The blue and white banner was technically still just the flag of the Zionist movement. And there were actually months of intense debate after that. Should they change it? Should a movement's flag just automatically become a state's flag? But ultimately, the public's connection to it was just too strong. By October 1948, the provisional government officially adopted the design we all know today. Now, if you ever want to trace this incredible journey for yourself, the history is literally still standing. You can visit Rishon LeZion, where that very first flag was unfurled in the sand back in 1885. You can stand right inside Independence Hall in Tel Aviv, where the state was declared. You can check out the Ink Flag Memorial down in Eilat, which marks the end of the War of Independence. Or you can even go explore Herzl's original 7-star vision at the Herzl Museum over in Jerusalem. We've seen how a single object manages to bridge the ancient commandment of Techelet blue with a modern political reality. It evolved from a global prayer shawl to a local vineyard colony, went through the absolute darkest moments of human history, all the way to a sovereign flagpole. So my final question to you is this. After uncovering the ancient dyes, the rejected designs, and the profound reclamations woven into these threads, how will you look at this flag differently tomorrow? Keep that in mind and keep learning.